This video contains audio content only. There are no visual elements or images accompanying the audio. If you're expecting to see video footage, please note that this is an intentional audio-only presentation. We recommend listening to this content rather than watching the screen. Thank you for your understanding and enjoy the audio. Join us as we unravel the captivating story of the goat and its profound symbolic significance across cultures. In this easy-to-understand exploration, we'll journey from ancient cave paintings to modern folklore, uncovering the goat's diverse roles as a divine messenger, guardian of the mountains, creature of the hearth, and even a scapegoat burdened with human sins. Prepare to discover how this remarkable animal has woven its way into the tapestry of human belief, reflecting our complex relationship with the natural world and the duality of our own nature. Let's begin. Chapter 1. From Wild Crags to Civilized Hearths, the Goat's Ancient Pact. The story of humanity's relationship with the goat begins not in the ordered pastures of settled farms, but in the jagged, wind-scoured cliffs of the ancient world. Long before the first cities rose from the mud of river valleys, our hunter-gatherer ancestors navigated a landscape where survival depended on keen observation and adaptability. It was here, among the vertiginous rocks and sparse vegetation, that humans first encountered the goat's wild ancestors, nimble, sure-footed creatures whose ability to thrive in harsh environments sparked both admiration and necessity. Evidence of this primal relationship survives in the flickering torchlight of prehistoric caves. On the walls of Lascaux in France and the mountains of Iran's Zagros Range, ochre and charcoal depictions of ibex and wild goats leap across stone canvases. These are not mere records of prey, but testaments to a creature that occupied a liminal space between sustenance and reverence. A 12,000-year-old carving from Shanidar Cave, modern-day Iraq, shows a goat standing atop a stylized mountain, its horns arching toward a cluster of celestial dots, a fusion of the terrestrial and divine that would echo through millennia. The shift from nomadic foraging to agricultural settlement marked a turning point in this relationship. Around 8000 BCE, in the Fertile Crescent's golden arc of land between the Tigris and Euphrates, humans made a revolutionary discovery: the wild Capra aegagrusculd be more than occasional prey. Selective breeding produced domesticated goats, Capra hircus, that provided milk, meat, and fiber with minimal pasturage. Unlike sheep or cattle, goats thrived on scrubby vegetation, converting marginal lands into sustenance, a trait that made them indispensable to early agrarian societies. Archaeological digs reveal the speed and scale of this transformation. At Ganj Dareh in western Iran, a 9,000-year-old settlement yielded the bones of over 1,500 goats, 94% showing signs of domestication. But this was no simple matter of animal husbandry. Cuneiform tablets from 3rd millennium BCE detail sophisticated herd management. Contracts between temple administrators and shepherds stipulated precise milk yields, wool quotas, and protocols for replacing goats lost to predators. One Sumerian text outlines a profit-sharing system where shepherds received 1 lamb for every 10 born, 1 measure of cheese for every 20, incentivizing careful stewardship. The goat's economic value permeated every layer of ancient society. When King Shulga of Ur boasted of sacking enemy cities, his scribes meticulously listed captured goats among treasures of gold and lapis lazuli. A terracotta tablet from Mari, circa 1800 BCE, records a merchant's caravan transporting 300 goats, 50 copper ingots, and 10 talents of wool, along the Euphrates trade routes. Goats became living currency, their value so consistent that Babylonian law codes used them to calculate fines. A man who damaged another's tooth paid 2 goats, assaulting a nobleman cost 30. Yet to view these creatures solely through an economic lens would miss their profound spiritual resonance. The same civilizations that tracked goat herds in administrative triplicate also imbued them with cosmic significance. At Al-Ubaid's Temple of Ninhursag, excavators found silver goat figurines with lapis lazuli horns placed in ritual niches, offerings to the Sumerian mother goddess of wilderness. Hittite storm gods rode goat-drawn chariots across clay votive plaques, their thunderous passage mimicking the clatter of hooves on mountain scree. This duality between practical and sacred manifested in extraordinary artifacts. The goat in a thicket, 2500 BCE, a Mesopotamian masterpiece of gold, copper, and lapis, depicts a ram standing upright against a flowering tree, its horns cradling a celestial orb. Found in the royal cemetery of Ur beside the body of a priestess, the statue likely symbolized the connection between earthly fertility and cosmic order. Similarly, Minoan Rita, ceremonial pouring vessels shaped like goat heads, transformed the act of libation into a sacred metaphor, as wine flowed through the animal's throat to nourish the earth. The goat's horns themselves became hierophanies, visible manifestations of the divine. In Anatolia's Çatalhöyük, a 9,000-year-old shrine displays bull and goat horns arranged in spirals, echoing the crescent moon's arc. Egyptian pharaohs wore the 8F crown adorned with ram horns when incarnating the god Amun. Even the Hebrew word karen means both horn and ray of light, linguistically merging the goat's most striking feature with divine radiance. Sumerian wisdom literature reveals how deeply goats permeated the ancient psyche. A proverb warns, "Do not laugh at the goat because his beard is long, he knows the barren hills you fear to tread." Another extols their resilience. "The goat eats bitter plants so her milk may sweeten." These were not mere observations of livestock, but metaphors for survival in a capricious world. When drought parched the land or invaders swept down from the hills, the goat's ability to persist became a living lesson in endurance. By the Bronze Age's zenith, the goat's transformation was complete. From Syria to the Indus Valley, its image adorned boundary markers and royal seals. A Hittite treaty tablet, 1280 BCE, bears the impression of a mountain goat, the empire's symbol of unassailable strength. Yet in quiet domestic spaces, terracotta figurines of nursing nanny goats still graced household altars, their bodies worn smooth by generations of hands seeking blessings for fertile fields and fruitful wombs. This chapter in the goat's journey, from wary coexistence to symbiotic partnership, laid the foundation for all that followed. The animal that had once represented humanity's struggle against nature became a bridge between earth and sky, between the counting house and the temple. Its hooves, equally at home on craggy cliffs and tamped earth barn floors, mirrored society's own balancing act between wilderness and civilization. As we trace the goat's path through myth and ritual in chapters to come, we must remember that every symbolic meaning, every god and demon, every parable and taboo, sprang from this primal dance of survival and reverence. Chapter 2. Guardians of the Peaks, Spirits of the Hearth, the Goat's Dual Dominion. The goat's hooves left their imprint not only on the dusty floors of ancient barns but also on the mythic imagination of civilizations. To understand its ascension from pasture to pantheon, we must climb into the thin air of sacred mountains and descend into the smoke-filled intimacy of household shrines, spaces where the goat stood as both sovereign and servant, wild and yet intimately woven into the fabric of daily life. High in the Taurus Mountains of Anatolia, where snow clings to peaks like torn wool, the nomadic Hattians carved effigies of a goddess they called Hasamili, Lady of the Crags. Her stone likeness, discovered near modern Kayseri, shows her seated on a throne of granite, flanked by ibexes whose spiraling horns frame her face like a crown. For these mountain dwellers, the goat was no mere animal. It was the living embodiment of the heights. A creature that could navigate treacherous cliffs with preternatural grace, its hooves biting into stone where human feet would falter. This bond between goat and high place reverberated across cultures. In the Hindu Kush, Kailash shepherds still sing to Mahandio, the goat-horned god who guards glaciers, while Quechua legends in the Andes tell of Tunu, a spectral goat leading lost travelers to safety through blinding puna storms. This alpine mystique found its most enduring expression in the Patnia Therin, the mistress of beasts, a deity whose roots stretch back to Neolithic Anatolia. A 6th century BCE Lydian relief depicts her standing astride two rearing goats, their muscular forelegs frozen mid-leap, their heads turned toward her outstretched hands in perfect symmetry. Art historians argue whether she represents Cybele, Artemis, or an older, nameless mother of wild things, but the message remains clear. The goat was the chosen intermediary between humanity and the untamed vertical world. Nowhere is this more striking than at Göbekli Tepe, where 12,000-year-old T-shaped pillars bear bas-reliefs of ibexes mid-cascade, their bodies flowing downward like liquid stone, a visual hymn to the goat's mastery of gravity's domain. Yet for all their association with alpine solitude, goats equally thrived in the crowded heart of Bronze Age cities. At Çatalhöyük, a 9,000-year-old proto-urban settlement, archaeologists uncovered a curious pattern. Nearly every plaster-walled home contained a niche holding a goat skull draped in ochre-stained cloth. These were not trophies from the hunt but domestic guardians, spiritual sentinels believed to protect against fires, a constant threat in reed-roofed dwellings. One particularly well-preserved example from level 6 shows the skull adorned with shell-inlaid eyes and a necklace of clay beads, its horns wrapped in braided human hair, a haunting fusion of animal and human essence. This duality, wild yet domestic, distant yet intimate, permeated daily life. Sumerian housewives in Ur kept small alabaster figurines of bearded goats by their cooking fires, whispering prayers to Ninkasi, goddess of beer, as they fermented barley in vessels shaped like goat udders. Hittite texts from Hattusa prescribe rituals where a black goat kid was paraded around a new home's perimeter before being sacrificed, its blood daubed on doorposts to seal the walls against serpents of the underworld. Even the act of milking carried cosmic weight. A Cappadocian clay tablet, circa 1800 BCE, depicts a goddess with goat ears nursing both a human infant and a sapling, her udders merging with tree roots, an earthy trinity of nurture. The goat's role as provider extended beyond milk and meat. In the Indus Valley, Harappan seals show goats standing beneath stylized trees, their mouths upturned to catch falling leaves. A motif scholars link to early understandings of ecological reciprocity. A remarkable set of 4,000-year-old weaving combs from Mohenjo-Daro, carved from boswellia wood, feature handles shaped like goat heads with obsidian eyes. Each tooth of the comb aligns with the ridges of the goat's horns, suggesting that carding wool was seen not just as a chore, but as a ritual transformation, turning the goat's wild coat into a thread connecting hearth to marketplace. This spiritual economic synthesis reached its zenith in Mesopotamian temple complexes. At Nippur-Zakor, House of the Mountain, the storm god Enlil's priests maintained a sacred herd whose goats wore copper collars inscribed with cuneiform prayers. Each morning, these animals were led through the city gates to graze, their bells clangor believed to drive off Rabasudemons lurking at civilization's edges. At dusk, their return procession became a moving liturgy, a reaffirmation of order against chaos. Temple records show that families paid a goat tithe of 1 kid per 10 births, ensuring the herd's divine protection extended to their homes. The goat's mountain-born resilience made it a natural military symbol. Hittite generals wore cloaks of shaggy goat hide into battle, believing the animal's sure-footedness would transfer to their phalanxes. A bronze standard from Alakahöyük, 2500 BCE, features a goat perched atop a zigzagging mountain peak, its silhouette echoed in the marching soldiers below. When Assyrian king Ashur-nasir-pal II boasted of conquering the Zagros tribes, his victory stele showed defeated chieftains prostrating beneath a colossal goat standard, an assertion that his empire now commanded both the plains and the untamable heights. Yet for all its martial pomp, the goat's truest power lay in its domestic ubiquity. A Phoenician ivory panel from Byblos, 1300 BCE, captures this paradox. A nanny goat lies curled in a woman's lap, her kid nursing contentedly, while through an archway behind them, wild ibexes leap across a starlit ridge. Here, in a single frame, is the animal's full symbolic spectrum: nurturer and nomad, hearth guardian and cliff-dwelling wraith. This duality manifested most poignantly in death rites. At Mycenaean Pylos, noblewomen were buried with gold diadems shaped like goat horns, their curves echoing the crescent moon, a promise of rebirth in celestial pastures. Meanwhile, in the Caucasus Mountains, Kura-Araxes shepherds practiced sky burial, placing their dead on high ledges where bearded vultures and wild goats would pick the bones clean, completing the cycle between human and mountain. By the Iron Age, the goat's symbolic journey had come full circle. Zoroastrian texts describe Gushernag, a mythical white goat whose milk nourished the first humans, while Celtic bards sang Ofgabron, a horned god who taught druids to read the future in goat entrails. Yet perhaps the most enduring legacy lies in a humble artifact from Pompeii's ruins: a child's terracotta rattle shaped like a goat's head, its hollow body still containing dried peas. When shaken, its clatter was believed to mimic the sound of hooves on stone, a mother's lullaby invoking the goat's ancient role as protector of thresholds, from the grandest temple to the smallest cradle. Chapter 3. Whispers in the Wilderness, the Goat as Storyteller and Oracle. The goat's true dominion lies not in the tangible realms of mountain or marketplace, but in the shadowlands of human imagination. Here, where myth breathes life into stone and folktales outlast empires, the goat emerges as both narrator and protagonist. A creature whose curling horns frame parables of cunning, resilience, and the eternal dance between mortality and the divine. To walk this labyrinth of stories is to understand how a humble ruminant became humanity's mirror, reflecting our deepest fears, aspirations, and unanswered questions. In the dusty courtyards of Sumerian scribal schools, where students etched cuneiform into damp clay tablets, one fable survived 3 millennia of conquests to reach us: the she-goat and the lion. The tale opens with a nanny goat grazing at the edge of the wilderness when a lion pounces, pinning her beneath his paw. "Spare me," she implores, "and I'll gift you a plump ewe from my master's flock." Intrigued, the lion demands her name. "Sahertum," she replies, Old Babylonian for she who outsmarts. The lion, flattered by this apparent compliment, releases her. When he later roars at the sheepfold's gates demanding payment, the goat calls from behind stone walls, "O clever one! The sheep you seek graze beyond the 7th hill." The lion spends days searching barren slopes while the goat's mocking bleats echo through the canyons. This 4,000-year-old joke, preserved on a tablet now housed in the Louvre, reveals more than ancient humor. It codifies the goat as trickster, a role it would reprise from the Himalayas to the Scottish Highlands. But trickery alone cannot sustain a mythos. In the mist-shrouded highlands of Dagestan, Avars tell of Chaban, a spectral goat with eyes like molten amber who appears to shepherds lost in blizzards. Those wise enough to grasp his woolly flank find themselves guided to hidden caves stocked with ancient cheeses and dry firewood. Those who attempt to bind or strike him are led off precipices, their frozen bodies discovered come spring with icicle beards mimicking Chaban's own. This duality, savior and executioner, permeates goat lore, embodying nature's capricious mercy. Nowhere is this balance more striking than in the Vedic Aitareya Brahmana's account of Sarama, the celestial bitch who tracks stolen cows to a Panis cave guarded by a 3-horned goat. When Sarama demands restitution, the goat, speaking with the voice of the storm god Indra, offers her a pact: "Drink from my udder, and I shall make you mother of all tracking hounds." The resulting symbiosis, canine shu wei, caprine intuition, births the Murids, storm deities who ride goats across monsoon skies. This ancient Indian text, composed when Mycenaean Greeks still fought with bronze, establishes the goat as cosmic mediator, a creature bridging species and realms. The Norse took this concept to its apotheosis in Tangrisnarantaniostar, the twin goats who pulled Thor's chariot across the Bifrost. Snorri Sturluson's Edda, 13th century CE, describes how the thunder god could slaughter and eat his steeds each night, only to resurrect them at dawn by blessing their bones with Mjolnir. This grotesque communion, deity consuming his divine transport, symbolized the cycle of destruction and renewal inherent to both storms and agriculture. Icelandic runestones depict the goats with intertwined horns forming the Valknut symbol, their bodies contorted into the 3 interlocking triangles that signified the passage between worlds. Yet for every cosmic goat, there exists its earthly shadow. In the Appalachian Hollows, settlers' tales warn of the Wampus cat, a ghostly goat-eyed creature whose mournful wails mimic lost children. Cherokee elders counter that the Wampus was once a woman who spied on men's sacred rituals, transformed into a half-feline, half-caprine hybrid as punishment. Here, the goat becomes avatar of transgression, its horizontal pupils watching eternally from the forest's edge. This liminal quality, the goat as boundary crosser, manifested most powerfully in divination practices. Etruscan Haruspice prized goat livers above all others for haruspice, believing the organ's 4 lobes mirrored Earth's cardinal directions. A bronze model from Piacenza, circa 100 BCE, shows the liver divided into 40 regions, each inscribed with god names in Etruscan script. To read a freshly harvested goat liver was to navigate a microcosm of fate, the gallbladder's placement indicating approaching wars or plagues. Similarly, Mongol shamans draped themselves in goat pelts during soul journeys, the animal's keratin horns thought to pierce veils between worlds. The goat's voice itself became oracular. In Greece's Dodona sanctuary, priests interpreted Zeus' will through the rustling of sacred oak leaves, but only after sacrificing a white goat and stretching its hide beneath the tree. A 2nd century BCE inscription records a query from King Pyrrhus: "Should I wage war on Rome?" The reply came not as words, but as a gust that flipped the goatskin flesh side up, an omen of bloodshed. Centuries later, Venetian merchants sailing to Constantinople consulted Capricornus boards, ivory tablets carved with goat-headed nymphs. By floating these in moonlit seawater and observing their rotations, navigators claimed to receive course corrections from the stars themselves. Perhaps no story captures the goat's paradoxical nature better than the Lenape legend of Mahakzak, the resurrection goat. As recorded in 18th-century Moravian missionary journals, the tale tells of a hunter who finds a goat kid trapped in a sinkhole. While others would exploit the helpless creature, the man frees it and shares his last pemmican. That night, the kid returns as a spectral buck with antlers scraping the Milky Way. "For your compassion," it intones, "I gift you the yokaso, the breath that wakes seeds from snow." The hunter uses this power to revive his frozen tribe after a catastrophic winter, but at a cost. Henceforth, his people must protect all goats as kin. When European settlers arrived with domesticated goats centuries later, Lenape healers recognized the animal's Osmoxizak's descendants and incorporated them into sacred rituals, a rare case of myth shaping ecological stewardship. The goat's physical form became a hieroglyph of hidden truths. In medieval alchemical manuscripts, the Capricornus symbol, Capricorn, represented the prima materia, the primal substance awaiting transformation. German adept Heinrich Kunrath's Amphitheatrum Sapientiae Aeternae, 1595, depicts a winged goat straddling a crescent moon, its hooves crushing a serpent while a third eye blazes on its forehead. This chimera encoded the alchemical process: horns, earthly matter; wings, volatile spirit; and the Ouroboros serpent, eternal cycle. Even the goat's fabled ability to thrive on poisonous plants, from which we get the term scapegoat, fascinated Paracelsus, who wrote In de Natura Rerum that the goat's belly is nature's Athenor, transmuting bitter weeds into sweet milk, a model for the magnum opus. Yet for all its lofty symbolism, the goat remains stubbornly, gloriously earthy. Portuguese sailors recount how Vasco da Gama's crew, starving off the Cape of Good Hope in 1497, were saved by a wild goat that swam to their ship. A scene later immortalized Enos Luciadas's, the Capricornus who defied Neptune's wrath. In Japan's Ainu villages, elderly women still perform the Chikap Kamui ritual, donning goat hide robes to channel the animal's spirit during bear festivals. And in the American Southwest, Navajo weavers incorporate goat hair into storm pattern rugs, believing the fibers carry memories of alpine thunderstorms that birthed their people. From the Sumerian scribe chuckling at his tablet to the Lenape elder singing to her goats, humanity has projected onto this creature our wit and wonder, dread and desire. The stories collected here, trickster fables, oracular rites, resurrection myths, are not mere fancies. They are the hoofprints left by a being that walked beside us through history's valleys, its horns catching the first and last light of civilizations. To know these tales is to glimpse the goat not as a passive player in our drama, but as co-author of a narrative still unfolding in the space between wilderness and hearth. Chapter 4. Horns of Heaven and Hell, the Goat's Divided Legacy. Beneath the goat's hooves lies a fault line in the human psyche, a schism between reverence and revulsion, divinity and damnation. This chapter charts the animal's perilous descent from celestial heights into the sulphurous pits of collective fear, a journey that mirrors humanity's own struggle to reconcile the sacred and the profane. Here, in the smoke of burning temples and the ink of grimoires, we trace how the same creature that suckled infant gods became the cloven-hoofed architect of damnation. In the Arcadian highlands of ancient Greece, where olive groves give way to wolf-haunted forests, shepherds whispered of footsteps echoing through moonlit glens, a syncopated rhythm of human tread and hoof fall. This was Pan, the goat-legged god whose very name meant all. his horns crowned with pine needles and his beard tangled with wild grapes. To Athenian philosophers, Pan symbolized nature's boundless fecundity. His sudden appearances, panikos, could inspire either poetic ecstasy or mindless terror. A 4th century BCE votive statue from Mount Lycaon captures this duality. The god's upper torso radiates Apollonian calm, while his shaggy hindquarters twist mid-leap, muscles coiled to flee or ravage. This tension between order and chaos found its apotheosis in Dionysian rites. Euripides at Bacchae, 405 BCE, climaxes with Agave tearing apart her son Pentheus, mistaking him for a sacrificial goat, a metaphor for civilization's fragile veneer cracking under nature's intoxicating sway. Vase paintings from this period show Maenads clad in goat pelts, their thyrsus wands tipped with pine cones dripping with honeyed wine. During the Dionysia festival, Athenian youths wore goatskin tunics, tragoi, while performing choruses that birthed Western tragedy, literally, goat song. Thespis himself was said to have smeared his face with ash and goat's blood before stepping from the chorus, inventing the actor's art through Caprine inspiration. Yet as the Roman Empire Christianized, these symbols curdled. Early church fathers weaponized pagan imagery. Clement of Alexandria, 150–215 CE, likened Dionysian rites to devils dancing in goat flesh, while Tertullian branded Pan, the devil's harbinger. His stench precedes the Antichrist. This rhetorical alchemy transformed the goat from divine intermediary to infernal accomplice. A 6th century CE mosaic in Ravenna's Basilica of San Vitale makes this shift explicit. Christ enthroned as Pantocrator tramples a horned goat underfoot, its twisted neck mirroring the damned in adjacent hellscapes. The scapegoat ritual, once a solemn Hebrew atonement, morphed into something darker under Christian exegesis. Leviticus chapter 16 verse 8–10 feet S. Azazel, the goat that departs, became conflated with fallen angels in the Book of Enoch. By the 12th century, illuminated manuscripts like the Hortus Deliciarum depicted the scapegoat as a black-furred demon with glowing eyes, its back piled high with writhing sinners. Folk traditions amplified this. In Provençal villages, the bouc émissaire, a goat draped in villagers' rags, was driven into plague-stricken woods while priests chanted, "Bear our sins to Satan's table." No figure better encapsulates this demonic metamorphosis than the Sabbat goat of medieval witch trials. Inquisitors' manuals like the Malleus Maleficarum, 1487, detailed how witches anointed themselves with unguent made from baby's fat and he-goat's bile, before flying to blasphemous gatherings. Tribunal records from Trier, 1581–1593, describe accused witch Clara Geisler testifying under torture that the devil came as a goat whose member was cold as ice. These fantasies found visual form in Albrecht Dürer's The Witch, 1500, where a haggard crone rides a giant goat backwards through a Baschian nightmare, clutching a distaff symbolizing perverted domesticity. The Reformation intensified this imagery. Protestant broadsides depicted the Pope astride a 7-horned goat spewing indulgences like dung. Meanwhile, in Seville's Auto da Fe spectacles, conversos accused of crypto-Judaism were forced to wear sanbenitos painted with goat-headed demons. This hysteria reached its zenith in 1616 Bohemia, when astronomer Johannes Kepler's mother Katerina stood trial for witchcraft. Charges stemming partly from her keeping a goat that allegedly curdled neighbors' milk during arguments. Yet even as the goat burned in European squares, it retained sacred potency elsewhere. Ethiopian Coptic churches still display tablets, ark replicas draped in goat hair cloth believed to channel the Shekinah's presence. In Nepal's Bhaktapur, the Guru Puja festival honors Durga's goat avatar with masked dancers whose bells drive demons into straw effigies later drowned in the Hanamante River. Even the Islamic Eid al-Adha preserves Abraham's substituted ram, often conflated with goats in folk practice, as a symbol of divine mercy. This duality erupted spectacularly in 1856 Paris, when occultist Eliphas Levi unveiled his Baphomet illustration, a winged, goat-headed hermaphrodite with a torch between its horns and pentagram on its brow. Levi intended it as the synthesis of all mysteries, combining Templar legends with alchemical symbols. Yet this nuanced vision was soon co-opted. Anton LaVey Satanic Bible, 1969. Placed Baphomet on its cover, reducing LaVey's complex androgyny to a masthead for rebellion. Today, this twisted goat god gazes from death metal albums and Supreme Court protests, a Rorschach test for society's deepest anxieties. Beneath these shifting masks lies an unbroken thread. The goat is screened for projection. When 16th-century Venetians painted plague saints trampling goats, they externalized their terror of Black Death. When Romantic poets like Wordsworth invoked mountain goats careering on the edge of dread, they voiced industrial ennui. Even modern horror films like The Witch, 2015, resurrect the goat as demon trope to explore puritanical sexual repression. The goat's horns, once symbols of divine connection, now pierce modernity's subconscious. Perhaps this explains the recent surge in goat yoga and goat cafes, desperate attempts to reclaim the animal's innocence. Yet as Ukrainian soldiers adopt the Azov Brigade's goat skull emblem or QAnon conspiracists rant about adrenochrome harvested from goat-headed elites, the ancient duality endures. The goat remains our mirror, reflecting whatever heaven or hell we choose to see. Chapter 5. The Scapegoat's Journey, From Altar to Allegory. Beneath the bleating of goats driven into deserts and the silence of effigies burning in village squares lies a truth as old as communal life itself. Societies survive by transferring their collective shadows onto sacrificial vessels. This final chapter follows the scapegoat's path from literal ritual to psychological archetype, tracing how a Bronze Age purification rite became the scaffolding for humanity's endless dance of blame and redemption. Here, in the space between sacred knives and Twitter mobs, the goat's most enduring role emerges, not as deity or demon, but as the mirror reflecting our need to expel the darkness within. The ritual began in dust. On the 10th day of Tishri, as the Jerusalem sun blanched the Temple Mount's limestone, the high priest Aaron faced two male goats, their coats identically spotless, their horns gilded for the occasion. One would be sacrificed to Yahweh, its blood dashed against the Ark of the Covenant. The other, the Azazel goat, bore a heavier fate. As Leviticus commands, Aaron pressed his hands upon its head, confessing the sins of Israel, adulteries, thefts, jealous whispers, until the weight of transference bowed the animal's spine. A crimson thread tied to its horns, the goat was led through the eastern gate by a designated sinner, traditionally a Levite with no living relatives, past the Mount of Olives' silver-green olives, into the Judean desert's alkali wastes. At a precipice Kalidhar Hamisha, the Mount of Unction, the escort shoved the goat backward, its body shattering on flints below, a kinetic psalm of absolution. But this was no uniquely Hebrew practice. 1,000 years earlier, in Babylon's Sakatu festival, priests draped a ram in the king's robes before drowning it in the Euphrates, absorbing royal misdeeds. Hittite texts from Hattusa describe Hassanis goats driven into enemy territory before battle, their fleeces smeared with plague pus. Even the Aztecs, an ocean away, practiced Tepetitlisli, binding straw effigies to goat kids, then flinging them into Lake Texcoco to drown Montezuma's hubris. What unites these rituals is not theology, but theater, the communal catharsis of watching sin walk away on four legs. Archaeology reveals how deeply this theater penetrated daily life. At Megiddo, a 3,200-year-old goat skull bears cuneiform markings from a Hittite exorcism. Let the teeth that bit, the hooves that trampled, depart with this head. In York's Viking-era layers, excavators found a goat buried beneath a threshold with its legs deliberately broken, a Nordic threshold guardian to trap household evils. The most haunting evidence comes from Marseille's 1720 plague pits, where mass graves contain goats interred alongside humans, their horns painted with ochre crosses. Parish records note these were sin-eaters, bought from alpine herders, their price tripling as death carts overran the city. The Enlightenment reframed the scapegoat but couldn't kill it. When Voltaire's écrit l'infamie echoed through Parisian salons, the goat migrated from religious rite to political metaphor. Revolutionaries guillotined a goat-drawn effigy of Marie Antoinette in 1793, its papier-mâché womb spilling fake airs to mock her alleged decadence. In 1849, Hungarian poet Sándor Petőfi penned A Back, the Goat, casting Lajos Kossuth's exiled revolutionaries as horned martyrs bearing Austria's crimes. By 1915, The metaphor turned lethal. Armenian genocide survivors reported Ottoman soldiers forcing families to watch goats slaughtered while chanting, "Your fate, your fate." Psychology codified what ritual had long enacted. René Girard's mimetic theory, 1972, identified the scapegoat mechanism as society's release valve, a way to redirect mimetic rivalries onto a sacrificial crisis. But long before Girard, the goat haunted Freud's couch. His 1909 case study of The Wolf Man analyzed a patient's goat phobia as castration anxiety, while Jungian analysts saw in the scapegoat archetype the shadow's self-made flesh. Modernity's scapegoats wear digital horns. Silicon Valley's fail fast ethos echoes ancient rites. In 2016, Facebook live-streamed employees ritually sacrificing a goat, named Disrupt, to appease algorithmic gods, a literal enactment of Girard's theories. Online cancel culture follows the Levitical script: sins named, transferred, expelled. Even epidemiology borrows the metaphor. COVID-19's Wuhan lab leak theory saw Chinese scientists cast as global Azazels, their reputations driven into geopolitical deserts. Yet the goat's resilience endures. In Ethiopia's Omo Valley, Karen tribesmen still practice boko, painting goats with ochre and releasing them into disputed territories to absorb interclan grudges. But Tonslosar Festival features cham dancers in goat masks who eat written accusations during Lunar New Year. Most strikingly, in 2022 Ukraine, artists painted goats on bombed Russian tanks, a defiant reclamation of the scapegoat as resistance symbol. The ultimate truth lies in biology. Goats, unlike sheep, lack a flocking instinct. They disperse under threat, making them perfect candidates for exile. This quirk of evolution became a keystone of human culture. From Azazel's cliffs to Twitter's hashtags, we've harnessed the goat's independence to carry what we dare not face. Its horns, once bridges to the divine, now hold the weight of our unconfessed shadows. As dawn breaks over the Negev desert, Bedouin herders still sing an ancient lament to their goats. Carry our quarrels to the jinn, but return with milk sweet as forgiveness. In this eternal exchange, sin for sustenance, blame for blessing, lies the scapegoat's paradox. We destroy what saves us, then sanctify its memory. The goat walks on, cloven hooves tracing a path through wilderness and Wi-Fi, bearing the burden we'll always need to shed. From prehistoric cave paintings to modern idioms, the goat's symbolic journey reflects humanity's complex relationship with nature and the divine. Its duality, embodying both the sacred, fertility, resilience, and profane, lust, the demonic, reveals cultural anxieties and evolving spiritual beliefs. Understanding these diverse interpretations enriches our understanding of human-animal interactions and the power of symbolism in shaping cultural narratives. This exploration opens doors to understanding cultural evolution, mythology, and even social psychology. Where do you see the goat's influence in your own culture? Share your thoughts and questions below. Like, subscribe, and suggest topics for future explorations. Keep asking questions. The journey of discovery never ends.